When it comes to digital audio and especially DACs, I thought I had heard pretty much everything in terms of all the different technologies and then the different sounds that those technologies can produce, such as off-the-shelf DAC chips, very good FPGA, very good R2R, and yeah, some others in between. And that's what's made this review really interesting for me of the Ideon Audio EOS Stream, Time and DAC, because I've definitely learnt some things in this review, and some of what I've learnt I really like. But it can be hard to review very high-end digital audio products that are designed with a maximum performance but maybe minimum thrills, that still gives you maximum thrills type of product, because I think the digital audio marketplace has set itself out over recent years so that some audiophiles will judge maybe a music server's quality based on what features it offers, and other audiophiles might base a DAC's quality based on purely just a simple set of measurements or results from those measurements. And I think that's missing the bigger picture. I think the difference between digital audio products, or what separates really good from maybe not as good, is in the experience. The better digital audio products, I think, become less about, or music becomes less about something that you sit and listen to, and more about something that you experience. And that's really important when we look at very affordable digital products. They're all bit perfect, all the music's there, it's all organized precisely, it's all there perfectly to some degree. However, when you compare to something that's a little bit more special, and it elevates the music and it becomes more about something that you experience, I think the measurements to some degree go out the window and the features to some degree go out of the window, and then it becomes all about that experience. Does that experience make you enjoy the music more? And with that maybe contentious intro out of the way, let's talk about the Ideon Audio EOS DAC. And if you're new to Ideon Audio, they are a high-end manufacturer from Greece, and they make that quite clear on the rear of their products, which I like. And I think this is going to be one of the high-end audio buzz companies of the next few years, based on what I've seen across the other press and what I've heard now for myself. I think Ideon's design approach is very familiar, but also distinctly different. And the EOS is the middle of their range. And I think the intent of the product is to try and offer as much of the absolute range, which is Ideon's flagship range of products, as much of that sound quality as possible in a more affordable package. But more affordable doesn't necessarily mean it's, affordable end of the market. Each individual product's still a considerable amount of money in its own right. I think in order to do that, there has been not too many frills approach taken to the aesthetic design of the components. Each of the three EOS I have here are heavy and solid and feel built like tanks, but they definitely don't ooze luxury. We get nice faceplates, an okay screen for the DAC, and quality connections, but the rest all feels a little bit mandatory. And there is not even an option to dim the brightness or turn off the display on the DAC, just as an example. And I think we'll see a few more examples of this as we work through the review. But one thing I really like is the triple stack type of look and design, and the fact that it only takes up one kind of rack space. I just like it, looking at it as a triple stack, it definitely works, I think, aesthetically better than just looking at the products individually. All of them are standalone products, which means you could use any of them individually within any HiFi system. So I'm going to review them individually to some degree, and of course as a collective whole. And if you're only interested in what the system is like as a collective whole for its sound quality, I can save you a lot of time. It's awesome. It's one of the best digital solutions and sounds and setups I've had in my room ever before. And yeah, it's expensive, but it's awesome. It's an awesome system. But let's start with the EOS DAC, because for many, this will be the most relatable of the three and could be where someone wants to start their Ideon EOS journey. And it's a very simple product on the outside. We have an on button, a dot matrix type of screen that's very bright and very blue, but I actually like the color. And there is a wheel to adjust the three inputs between USB or SPDIF, either BNC or coax. There are single-ended and balanced outputs, and a power connection, and that is it. But do we need more, or should we expect more for the asking price of £10,000? So you have to remember, this is a performance first, minimum thrills, maximum thrills type of product. So I think in order to, get to fully grips with the EOS DAC, we need to pop that lid and look inside. I popped the lid and asked a lot of questions, and I was very impressed with the internals, with how everything is laid out and labelled in an almost presented for camera fashion. The EOS DAC is based around an ESS Sabre DAC chip, but Ideon don't really talk too much about which one because to them it's not important. They told me they took the chip with the most potential and then wrote 4,000 lines of code to make it behave more how they want it to. But they told me it's only a small part of the DAC's performance. The EOS DAC is loaded with high quality, best-in-class components, such as a custom transformer, several Crystec clocks, 8 ultra-low noise regulators, ultra-low noise power supplies, Mika capacitors in the analog stage, with the analog output stage being a custom unique quad topology with no DC server or capacitors in the signal path. And I think it all looks and sounds, excuse the pun, great, but does any of it matter or make any difference? To test the sound quality, I have been listening to the whole stack for about 6 weeks with various amplifiers and 3 different speakers, so I could hear different attributes and make sure what I was hearing was not a one-off situation. I then did some comparison listening with my current reference DAC, the Chord Hugo TT2, which is an excellent DAC in its own right. And it was this comparison where it really hit home to me just how good the EOS DAC is. It sounds big, bold, very dynamic from the bass right up to the treble, including ambient information. And the way the sound gets out of the speakers and comes out into the room and goes away from you beyond the speakers in a very three-dimensional fashion, it does all of that better than the TT2. And music just has an energy and an immediacy to it that just definitely feels just kind of more live. It has like a more live energy and immediacy to it, which you definitely notice with some music more than others, but you also notice it across the full frequency spectrum from the bass up to the treble. And again, it does that better than the TT2. And one particular album that I've noticed and I've been listening to a lot lately is Catherine Russell, if I get that on the screen correctly, Catherine Russell, Harlem on My Mind. And there's a real mixture of stuff in this album, a mixture of live instruments, jazz instruments, and really great vocals going on. And this album can be a little raw sounding depending on what system and speakers that you're listening to. But interestingly, the way that the EOS DAC and the EOS DAC brings this album to life, the way the instruments come through with this real energy and pizzazz to them, with really great three-dimensional space, is really, again, something to listen to. And what I like about the lively energy presentation from the EOS DAC is that it doesn't do it with any hardness or in an analytical or too forceful way. Yeah, the music's got this fantastic energy, but it's also got a freely rounded character. So it's big, it's energetic, but it's pleasing at the same time because it has this just roundedness to each individual aspect, and it's damn impressive. And the speakers that, out of the 3 that I've had in here recently that I've been testing this system with, that I noticed this the most, is the ones you can see behind me, the Revival Audio Atalante 5. But in terms of specific information or details or edge definition, the TT2 has the edge, excuse the pun. It draws the musical picture with more clarity in some regards. But the EOS DAC has a smoother, bolder way of presenting the same information, where the music has a warmer tone and is more pleasing, even though the musical picture is not as carved out in stone clear, or maybe quite as articulate. Yet you don't feel like you're missing detail. In fact, it's the opposite. The EOS DAC presents more subtle details hidden in the music layers. And it's the bass from the EOS DAC that has impressed me the most, because it's really big, it's really rounded, it's really pleasing, and the TT2's bass just isn't as big and bold and in the room, even in its filter modes 3 and 4, which definitely improves that side of its performance. It just isn't quite the same. So the EOS DAC has the edge in terms of bass power and presence in the room, but the TT2's bass is probably a little tighter and a bit more controlled and articulate, but in terms of kind of a scale and a pleasing factor and just the way the bass hits the room and hits you in the listening chair and then elevates, the scale on, just the way the music is presented, yeah, the EOS DAC definitely has the edge. The mid-range and the vocals from the EOS DAC, I think they just sound a bit more natural, and they are presented in a nicer, more pleasing way as well. And all of these differences I think are obvious. They're big differences, they're tangible differences, not subtle ones, they're tangible differences. So it comes back down to what I said in the introduction of this video. The Chord Electronics Hugo TT2 is an excellent DAC in its own right, and it presents music in a three-dimensional, clear, ultra clear in a way, or with an ultra clear presentation. And that's fantastic. You know, it's my reference DAC. It's absolutely fantastic. However, when you listen to the EOS DAC, it presents the same music, but with more impact in certain specific areas. And does that impact make you enjoy the music more? I think for a lot of audiophiles, yes, it possibly would. Yes, it probably would. And I think a lot of audiophiles would see the EOS DAC as like the next one on, like the next level up in terms of DAC sound quality. Not necessarily in every area, but in a lot of areas. And when you're looking at audio products at this level, at this kind of quality, you're not going to get everything better. If you can get a lot of the areas better, well, then that's enough, you know, to class as the next product on. But we do have to remember that this was testing the TT2 in like an all Ideon audio system. It shouldn't really matter, but of course that is something to consider. I tested with the time and without the time clock to see what kind of difference that made. And we have to factor the price, because the EOS DAC is more than double the price of the Chord TT2, and if you add the time, then it becomes 3 times the price. So it would be more price comparable with Chord's Dave DAC, but I don't have a Dave DAC here to do any kind of comparison or testing. So that would be something that I would recommend, you know, a buyer go and do. A buyer should be comparing these DACs to see which one works best for them, especially at this, you know, lofty price level. Now let's talk about the Ideon audio time, which I think a lot of audiophiles will look at it and think, yeah, that's just another clock upgrade that we've seen from many manufacturers for many years. But it's not quite the same as that, because it's looking to improve the USB output or the USB signal from a music server to a DAC. And it uses Ideon's 3R principle, which is reclock, regenerate, and redrive. And what's interesting is, well, if I don't drop it, at the same time I've been testing this, which is, now this is the Ideon Audio 3R Renaissance Black Edition, which is essentially doing the same thing: redrive, regenerate, and the reclocking of the USB signal. And this is designed for maybe more entry-level music servers, or just anyone using a computer as their music source, a PC or maybe a laptop. And for about £400, this makes a really nice difference. It helps to kind of unmuddy the signal to some degree, make it clearer and cleaner and less edgy. So for £400, this is a great product to consider. And I thought it could be, you know, maybe relatable to some audiophiles watching this video, that, you know, where the big products of this review might be a later on thing to consider. Because the EOS Time is another high-end product with a big price tag of £6,550. So again, I wanted to, you know, get under the hood, literally, and find out more about it. When I removed the lid, I saw a similarly impressive laid out and labelled construction. Custom transformer, lots of caps in the power supply, and then clearly the reclocking, regenerate and redrive will be completed by Ideon Audio's custom code. And what's interesting about the EOS Time is you can control to enable or disable the 5V on the USB. On the rear, it's extremely simple. You have USB in, USB out, a power connection, and a 5V on and off selector. So if your DAC doesn't need 5V, you can disable it. And why would you want to do that? Well, because there's a good chance that it will give you better sound quality. It definitely does with the EOS DAC, because it doesn't need 5V, but it can still be played with the 5V enabled, so you can test this for yourself. And for me, with the 5V enabled, the EOS DAC sounded harder, harsher, nowhere near as smooth and rounded and as pleasing. Turn that 5V off and yeah, it sounds significantly better. And it's a great thing to do, actually, to do this test if you get the chance, because it shows you the impact and the influence of that 5V, of the power connection on a USB cable or connection between products. But does the EOS Time make any difference to the sound? Well, interestingly, testing direct from the EOS stream, you can also choose to use 5V or not. So it was possible to create a like-for-like comparison. And at first, I wasn't sure there was that much difference, and I thought the system sounded a little warmer and bolder not using the time. But I soon realised that that is an illusion, because the sound of the system was now more tightly packed together, or maybe more congested sounding. That lovely, big, smooth, expansive but open sound I had been enjoying was now more mechanical sounding and felt more tied to the speakers rather than free of them. The sound was less pleasing overall, the bass was not as full or well defined, and the vocals lost that rounded 3D character that I really liked. But don't get me wrong, it wasn't as if the music all of a sudden sounded disgusting, of course not. It was just that, I think back to that experience thing that I've mentioned a few times through the review. Once you've experienced the music presented to you bigger, bolder, with nicer, more rounded bass, a vocal that has a lovely or more lovely rounded 3D character, when you take the time away and the music sounds more mechanical, but a bit more 2D, less pleasing and impactful on you in a lot of ways, well then I think you enjoy the music less as a result. So what's interesting about this for me is that the Time is a really interesting product because it seems like it's like the gloss. It's like the gloss on the sound of the system, or really it's like the polish, you know, the real extreme polish on everything, top to bottom across the system. But it also shows some interesting things, such as the EOS DAC seems to be very sensitive to its incoming signal. And I think what I was then hearing without the Time in the system really comes down to the audio or USB output quality of the EOS Stream server. The Ideon Audio EOS Stream is quite a familiar music streamer or server that we have a lot of available on the market these days. And it can have up to 8 terabytes of internal storage, it's a room bridge, it supports AirPlay and Spotify and Tidal and UPnP, which is how I controlled it to stream music from Tidal using the JPlay app, which is my control app of choice on iOS. And you can access music from a NAS or plug in a USB drive into the rear. And that is about it for its main features. So I think we do need to scratch a little deeper, you know, scratch under the surface to look at the full quality of the product really against the asking price of £10,250. So I popped the lid to look inside, and no surprise by now, it's very interesting on the inside. We can see it's a computer-based music server, but Ideon told me that they have chosen the computer parts for specific technical reasons, and they told me they modified the motherboard, and we can see evidence of that. We can again see a custom transformer and lots of audio grade capacitors. Ideon are using active rectification with the highest grade low noise power supplies and regulators. Then we can see some USB reclocking going on, so you're not listening to the USB straight from the motherboard, which is very important. You're already getting a better USB output than that. Then there is a custom operating system and software Ideon have designed themselves, and software matters a lot for sound quality with computer-based audio. I've spent a decade messing with this, and I appreciate and know how important it is. And this all looks impressive, but how does the stream perform? Well, it's actually the first product I tested as part of this review. I compared it and tested it against my own computer-based custom music server that features all the best DIY parts from JCat. It features a linear power supply, the world's first and only fully linear ATX computer power supply that costs over £5,000 and weighs over 30 kilograms. So my own custom music server is very high quality, and the Ideon Audio EOS Stream almost performed at the same kind of level, which was really impressive. It was close in some regards, but I think again it had a bit more of a congested type of sound. My own music server sounded a bit airier, more free. The sound was lighter on its feet and more free of the speakers. But I think the EOS server sounded a bit warmer and maybe a bit more dense and a bit fuller than my own music server. So it's interesting, and I would say, you know, it impressed me. The EOS Stream really impressed me for sound quality as a music source. So the sound that I was hearing from the EOS DAC without the Time in the system was definitely familiar. It was familiar to me from my early testing of the EOS Stream. So from that, I can say that the Time is a really, really interesting product that definitely seems to elevate things in certain key and critical ways. And overall, this is a very impressive sounding full digital audio setup. So far, this review has been mostly all positives. What about some negatives, or really the aspects that are the no frills part that I mentioned earlier in the review? Well, one example of that would be the control interface of the EOS Stream. Ideon told me there is a dedicated app currently in the works. To control the stream settings now, you have to access them via a web browser. And while this is all fine, it does feel old-fashioned, not to the level of the majority of the competition. But if you use Roon, Tidal Connect or UPnP and stream most of your music from the cloud, you might not even notice or care. Another potential negative of the EOS DAC would be its very big output. 8.8 volts I think is the output from the balanced outputs or connections, and that is all by design. It's all part of this unique design. But I did find I was having some playback issues just with the Audiolab 9000A integrated amplifier. So this is something that I asked Ideon Audio about, and they told me that they do have a firmware board that customers or owners can install if they ever had this issue where the output was too loud. And I thought this was really interesting, and it could be very, very useful information to share, which is why I'm mentioning it in this review. I suppose some other negative for some audiophiles could be maybe lack of connections. There's only a very limited number of connections in and out of the DAC, and there's no Wi-Fi for the EOS stream, which is, neither of these are really negatives for me, but they could be for some people. So again, it's worth mentioning. I'm going to nitpick the sound quality because at the overall price of this DAC, I think it's right to do so. I've got to say maybe a little bit more tight focus to the sound, and maybe just a touch more refinement. The two of those together would, be slightly better here, but that is nitpicking. But I've got to say I've been nothing but impressed with how big and bold and energetic and lively, but still kind of 3D and rounded and pleasing the sound has been. And I also have to mark the EOS products down for not offering any advanced room correction. Something like Dirac Live would make a huge difference to many audiophiles in real-world listening rooms. And I always mark any products down that don't offer that, but of course I am biased in that regard. So to sum up this very long 3 reviews in one really, I am crazy super fussy when it comes to a digital front end for my HiFi system. I can enjoy them all of course, but often I'm keen to return to my own extremely good setup that's been a staple part of my review system for years now, unchanged. But I have to admit the sound quality of this EOS DAC is not quite perfect, but it's so good in so many ways, it's opened my eyes to some degree. And I've been enjoying music in different ways because of how it's been elevating the experience of listening to it more than what I'm used to. And I think the EOS full digital stack and the way it's been designed, and therefore how it then sounds, I think really hits home the importance of more things, the importance of the bigger picture. It's not for us as audiophiles to obsess over DAC chips and obsess over specific measurements. We shouldn't obsess over that. We should definitely focus on the bigger picture, the overall music experience. And for me, the product that's probably made the biggest impression on me is definitely the EOS DAC. That's definitely the one that I'd like to revisit maybe in the future with a different front end setup. Will that EOS DAC still make the same mark on me as it has for this review? So maybe look out for that. But I just want to end this review with a clap for Ideon Audio, because this is a really awesome, really awesome sounding digital setup. Yes, it's expensive, but it really is awesome. And it's made a mark on me, one that I would unlikely to forget anytime soon. So I hope you've enjoyed this review. I hope you found it useful and helpful. If you enjoyed it, please hit the thumbs up button. And if you appreciate my take on HiFi and reviewing of HiFi, consider subscribing to the channel. And if you'd like to support the channel further, maybe consider supporting me on Patreon.